right, I guess it's about that time. Hey, everybody. We're getting ready to start the next session in this room. My name is Amy Harris. I am the program director for the Middle Tennessee Tech Research Program at MTSU, where I am also an associate professor of information systems and analytics in the Jones College of Business. I'm happy to be here today to release the Information Security Middle Tennessee Report and to facilitate the discussion with the amazing panelists that we have today to talk about finding and retaining InfoSec talent. Before we dive into the panel discussion, I'm going to spend about 10 minutes hitting on the highlights of the report's findings. But even before digging into that, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Middle Tennessee Tech Research Program. This initiative is a partnership that was established last year between the Nashville Technology Council and the Department of Information Systems and Analytics at MTSU. And we started this program with the goal of providing industry, economic development, and academic audiences with access to data on the current state of the local technology workforce. The first publication to come out of this was the State of Middle Tennessee Tech Research Report that was released in conjunction with the NTC's annual meeting last October. And that particular report provided summary data on the Middle Tennessee tech workforce as a whole, as well as for the major occupation groups identified within the tech workforce. And excuse me, one of the top findings that we found there was just the evidence of tremendous past and projected growth in regional technology jobs. And while that report contained a lot of really important and valuable information, even then we knew that there were going to be specific areas that we wanted to take deep dives into. InfoSec was definitely one of those, along with healthcare, software development, and analytics. The report being released today is the second in the series of those deep dives. We released healthcare back in April, and we will be releasing software development and analytics kind of later in the summer into early fall. And then there will be the release of the updated 2019 annual report at the NTC's IT Leadership Symposium in October. So this particular report, what we do is we examine job demand in the InfoSec space through an analysis of online job postings that were posted during calendar year 2018 for the 26 occupation groups that we've used to define tech in Middle Tennessee. So let's take a look at some of the highlights. There were over 38,000 unique postings for tech jobs. Now that's not just information security, that's all of tech in Middle Tennessee for 2018. And within that larger body of postings, we used a keyword search process to identify the postings that we were associated with information security. That search returned 4,100 postings that referenced at least one of the keywords that we used. So that's approximately 11% of the overall postings that referenced information security in some way. The last stat that you see on the screen gives a snapshot of growth in demand as measured by growth in postings volume. So in 2017, there were just over 3,600 unique postings that referenced information security. As I just mentioned, in 2018, that number jumped up to 4,100. So we've got a year-over-year growth rate there of 13%. So now let's take a look at some of the monthly trends. The top chart shows the number of overall active monthly postings for tech overall. The bottom chart does the same for InfoSec. The number of monthly postings grew through 2017 and 2018 for both InfoSec and tech overall. And going into the analysis, I was a little curious about how consistent the two trend lines would be, and whether there would be any time periods where information security constituted a lower or a higher proportion of the overall postings. Turns out the answer is not really. It was really pretty consistent, as you can see by the consistent patterns of the two trend lines. At any given point during this 2-year period, information security was referenced in just over 1/10 of the overall job postings, with those monthly percentages ranging from 10.9 to 12.9%. So a lot of consistency there. All right, now let's take a look at some of the key findings. I knew that there's no way in the world that I would keep this part be able to keep this presentation to 10 minutes if I put up the full top 10s for every single one of the dimensions that we analyze. So I've really hit the highlights and distilled down on this slide. But the report itself, which is available for download today, I'll talk more about that in a minute, that contains the top 10 for both InfoSec as well as tech overall to allow you to make some comparisons as measured by the total number of unique job postings that were published in 2018. So working our way down the list, the top InfoSec occupation was Information Security Analyst with just over 1,000 postings. This is the only occupation code as defined by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics that explicitly references security, so it makes sense that this would be the top occupation. Indeed, 25% of the information security postings map to this one occupation group. When looking at tech overall, excuse me. When looking at tech overall, InfoSec was just out, or this occupation was just outside the top 10. It came in at number 11, and that was with 3.2% of the overall postings mapping to it. As you move down to job title, the top ranked spot also goes to Information Security Analyst with 300 postings mapping to that title. If that is slightly confusing to you, no worries, there is a logical explanation, and that is that Information Security Analyst is both one of the Bureau of Labor Statistics occupations codes, as well as an individual job title. So job titles are assigned to those BLS occupation codes based on the duties that are associated with the job, and those assignments are made by people within the organizations who are making the postings. So a job title can be, many job titles can be mapped to one occupation code, which is why you see more postings mapping to Information Security Analysts than you do at the occupation group than you see for the specific job title. You know, to further illustrate, the second ranked job title in the InfoSec space was Security Engineer. And Security Engineer as a job title also frequently maps to the Information Security Analyst occupation code. So that's why you see the difference in the numbers. Security Engineer is also interesting in that it is the title that has the biggest rank difference across information security and comparing that to overall tech. While Security Engineer is the number 2 job title for InfoSec, it was ranked 32nd when looking at overall tech. So a 30 position jump as you move from tech in general to specifically InfoSec. Switching gears to skills and qualifications, the top hard skill identified for the InfoSec postings was operating systems, which was included in 26% of the postings. This skill also made the top 10 for overall tech, where it came in with, it was ranked 5th. The number 1 skill for overall tech, SQL, came in 2nd when looking specifically at information security. Disaster recovery is the skill that rounded out the top 3. So moving on to qualifications, the most in-demand certification was the Certified Information Systems Security Professional. 549 postings, which is roughly 13% of the information security postings, reference that certification. It also took the top spot when looking at tech overall, but what is surprising when looking at the big picture is how few postings in general contained any references to a specific qualification. As the highest ranked qualification overall, the CISSP certification was mentioned specifically in only 1.5% of the postings. And that's a small percentage, but still being represented in that 1.5% of postings was enough for it to earn the number 1 ranking for overall tech. So I find this really interesting. As anybody who works in tech, you know, we always have conversations about certifications, what are the right ones to get, are they really necessary, what does that mean? And I think this is an interesting data point around that and something I'm looking very forward to discussing with our panelists here in a few minutes. So that was a very quick look at some of the top level key findings, but I mean the details just can't be summed up in 10 minutes, so I hope that you will download the entire report, which is available at the link that you see here. Once you're on the website, you can just go to downloads. Information Security 2019 is one of the things on the list. We do ask for you to provide your name and email in order to download the report. I promise you that is not so that I can clutter your inbox with a bunch of needless stuff. The primary reason why we ask for it is because it gives us a means of tracking the volume of people who are actually downloading the report, and gives you an opportunity to explore the website, access the other reports that have already been released and will be released as part of this initiative, and to get more information and increase awareness about the fact that we do have the ability to create custom reports that are tailored to specific organizations' questions and needs. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can check out the website. You can also talk to me about it later. Last, I would just want to say many thanks to Kraft Technology Group. Don was over here, and Don Baham in particular. Thank you so much for underwriting the report and being one of the first cheerleaders for this project. The data that's required to provide this information to the community unfortunately does not come for free, and we wouldn't be able to do it if we didn't have the support of organizations who really believed in the project. I would also like to thank Mark Giesland for organizing this event and for allowing the report release to be a part of it today. There's just amazing energy in the halls, in the rooms, and I'm looking really forward to this conference becoming a part of the fabric of the Nashville tech community and an annual thing. All right, that's enough of me talking and running numbers. Let's get the panel started. I'll ask my panelists to come up and take a seat at the front. Nope. Grab wherever you want to go. All right, so rather than me reading off a whole bunch of bios and all that stuff, we're just going to let everybody go through and do a brief introduction of who you are and your organization and all that good stuff. We'll start. Well, you can do it.
I know. I thought it was safe on this side. I guess not. My name's Mackenzie Wheeler. I work for Asurion. I've been in recruiting for about 6.5 years. 5 of those years were spent specializing in technology. I've recently transitioned into a new role into security. Surprising, I know. I'm very excited. So I'm going to be supporting Mark Giesland at Asurion as his Senior Manager of Operations for Security and Risk. And my first initiative is to help with the Mavens program. So that's it.
Hello, Don Baham with Kraft Technology Group. We're part of Kraft CPAs, and we're happy to underwrite this paper. Glad to be a part of the panel as well. Looking forward to a good conversation.
Brian Lucy. I'm the CISO for CK Restaurants, so Carl's Jr. Hardee's.
Short and sweet introductions. Yay. As panelists, you guys were given early access to the report, and a lot of the conversation isn't going to focus specifically on the report, but as we get going, I just wanted to ask, were there any surprises in it to you? Like how do the results of the report, how do you see that aligning with what you see day to day in your organization? We'll take turns starting.
I think one of the things that was a good surprise to see is the conversation around risk management. So it's kind of been a topic that I think has not gained as much attention as it should in security. Information security should be a risk conversation at the board level or executive level. The fact that there was a risk management component to some skills that were necessary for certain job postings was a good thing to see, and it's indicative, I think, of a trend that we're hopefully heading in the right direction, where we're bringing up cyber risk in those business risk and executive risk conversations.
Brian,
Does this work?
Got 2 now.
I guess it works now. I didn't really see a lot of, I've been here 20 years in Nashville, and security's kind of been, I hate to say, kind of an afterthought in some ways. The one thing that bothered me about the report is seeing that the software developers was such a high level, overall tech jobs, but there was no mention of security within the software development space. So I know Mark's really passionate about that. But yeah, DevSec is really, really lacking in Nashville right now.
So just, I'm assuming you all haven't read it cover to cover since you probably just found out about it about 20 minutes ago. The points that we're following up on, when you look at the top 10 hard skills for information security, risk management was the number 10 hard skill. And in terms of software development, it is interesting when you look at overall tech, software developers for applications is the number one skill. And software developers were in the top 10 for, I'm looking for it real quick. Software developers were the number 3 ranked occupation in information security. But what was interesting there was that when you looked at the percentage of overall postings for application software developers, only 8% of those postings referenced any one of the information security keywords that we use. So that's just the background on that.
So there was a line at the beginning of the report calling out that in October of 2018, that was the month during the full calendar year that saw the highest monthly demand in a 2-year period with just over 1,000 active postings. So out of the full report, that was something that kind of stood out for me because at Asurion, we've been very consistent in our hiring trends over the last 4 years. So for us in technology, at the end of Q1, when people are kind of settled back into their roles, we've got all this money, we're looking to get some new talent, that's when we start to see the uptick in the talent demand for us in the tech space. And then that'll continue through Q2. Q3, we see it kind of start to level off, and then towards the end of Q3 and really going into Q4 is when it tapers for us. So it's a lot slower process on our end.
All right, so going into this project, when we did the healthcare report in April, I didn't know what to expect in the comparisons of healthcare tech jobs to overall tech jobs. I didn't really have any hypotheses there around, like, are there going to be these major differences in the top 10? And it turned out that there wasn't. There was a pretty high degree of consistency there. I did have expectations going into this one that the top 10 occupations, job titles, things were going to look different when we zoomed in on information security, and that absolutely, proved to be the case. There were substantive words, Amy, differences in the top 10 occupations, job titles, all the things. From your perspective and where you sit in your organizations, what are the primary challenges that you encounter in finding security talent? And I know my understanding from Mark is that you've had to create an entire team, so I think you're a great person to lead with this one.
Just challenges in general. I mean, for us, we're such a small company now. We got 4,000 locations across the globe. However, we have about right at 400 people now in our corporate office. So trying to we have money limitations and different things as well, and trying to find I guess really the security operations pieces, those technical guys, have always been difficult in Nashville in general. So trying to beat out the Asurions and everybody else for that talent is really tough for us. Additionally, I mean, Nashville's really, in my opinion, has kind of been more focused on the compliance side related to it. So those technical security guys are really, really hard to find. So we've had difficulties there. So we've had to look at, do we move over into a managed services and actually get a vendor to help us do that, or move off and have to search further out trying to find the right people?
Yeah.
So we're a smaller company, and we certainly have those challenges as well with budget and kind of figuring out how to make the most of the team we have, the talent we have. And I think in general, there's been a cyber shortage, talent shortage for quite some time. That's nothing new. Nashville, we're experiencing it here. So mean, we're looking outside of Nashville, recruiting efforts to other parts of the state, other states, and then trying to cultivate kind of a training program to enhance those skills that they may not, that the job may require, that they're not coming in with those skills to start.
So I would agree with both of those. For me, it's the most obvious. It's finding the security candidates, because I know everybody will probably be surprised to hear that they're really good at hiding, especially if they don't want to be found. So if you do find somebody, you've got one shot, and it's that one opportunity. You've got to make your role sound as exciting and cool to kind of pique their interest. And if you can get that response and you can get them open to a conversation, then you have the opportunity to build from there. So that's the initial challenge for me, I would think. And then with Amazon now coming to the Nashville market, it's questions around how are we going to remain competitive going up against them and everything that they have to offer as well.
So I'll ask a quick follow-up. You mentioned that and we've had this conversation before, is that as we talk about the tech talent shortages in general, sort of thinking outside the box about allowing people to transition and providing that sort of structure. What is your story with that? How did that work for you? How did you go from like?
Right. Recruiting's not a natural transition into security? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know.
No. I've actually, since I've been with Asurion, I've had several opportunities over the last 4 years with them to support many of our leaders in security. So I've been able to kind of develop this relationship with them and with our senior leaders as well. My strengths come from driving process, and they've been able to see that firsthand because they've got a lot going on, and I'm like, I'm trying to find you this person, and we are going to hire them by this deadline. I need your feedback. So for me, it was that, and the natural curiosity. I think security is so interesting to me. It is overwhelming, I'm not gonna lie. But having that natural curiosity to ask the follow-up questions, what they're doing. I've had the opportunity to participate in some of their events as well. And so I would hope it's the initiative and the drive and motivation. Yeah? My boss says yes.
Yeah. All right. So back to the conversation on certifications and the importance of certifications. It does seem, when you look at the results and the fact that certifications are referenced much more frequently when you focus in on InfoSec as opposed to kind of zooming out and looking at tech overall, that this is an area where certifications and such things seem to, there's more interest in that than perhaps other places. Why do you think that is, and what impact does that have on finding people, hiring people, in that whole process?
So I come from a technical background, traditional technical background without, started not on the security side. And folks that have been around for a while, the Microsoft certifications were easier to get, kind of paper MCSE type of situations, so you could study or cram for an exam and kind of get a technical certification with a whole lot of effort, nor did it require job experience. And so, at least from what I've seen, and I have studied for and sat for the CISSP exam a number of years ago when it was still on paper. Maybe it still is, I don't know. They probably have switched to electronic at this point, but it was a much tougher exam. It took 4 hours just to complete the exam, not to mention the studying. Plus, in order to actually get the credential, you have to have a certain number of hours or a certain number of years of work experience. So I think taking those factors in consideration, if I see somebody that has a CISSP or a CISA or something, or CISM, I'm more apt to validate that they actually have some real life experience, work experience, and kind of know what they're talking about, versus just a, Microsoft certification as an example.
I think it depends on the level that you're at or your career path. For me, I think when we're looking for external candidates, it's just kind of a checkbox to know that they know what they're talking about and what they're doing. I don't look at it as a end-all be-all. I kind of look at the person and the experience around that. One thing we had to do in our company is, going back almost to the third question, is we actually got people from other departments inside IT that didn't really have that security background. And then they're going off now and getting those certifications just for their own benefit. I think it's pretty important to have them just for this point of having that baseline, but it's not the end all be all for me.
So individuals who have certifications, I think it speaks a lot to them as an individual professional in the security world. So those are typically more motivated in my experience, right? They're motivated or inclined to take that initiative to explore a particular field of security. So it's building on that foundation of knowledge that they are over their time kind of growing. So the individuals who take the initiative to spend the time studying, the money that it takes to earn the certifications and putting in the effort to complete those, we're looking for them in hopes that they're going to apply that same dedication to that process in their day-to-day role with us.
And I would say, kind of in addition to that, coming on the talent retention side of things, we're willing to pay for certifications too, and so, but it does take time outside of work hours, and are they dedicated to doing that? So we look for people that maybe have a track record or at least express an interest in and are willing to make some sacrifices of their time to invest in that certification track as well. So.
Quick follow-up. Do you think that certifications matter more at certain stages in a candidate's career? Like, for instance, Tim Greer, my department chair, we were chatting over lunch, about just certifications in general, and are they a way for someone in an entry-level job to distinguish themselves? Anyway, just what are thoughts of, does it matter? Is it kind of uniform?
Actually, I think so. I mean, when I started out a long time ago, the Microsoft certifications and all those things, that was one step for me when I was in college, when I came out, to actually have something behind my name that helped me get into the door. I think, as I said, once you get to a certain level, you look more at your experience and what you've really done than the certifications itself. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo the same thing. It's like more important, or if there's a specialized skill as well. And so it may be later in the career, but if there's a specialized skill that you need for this particular role, then it can become important again. But kind of the same story as Brian. It's especially when you start out your career. Coupling that with a degree, or in some cases without a degree, but having some certifications behind you certainly can give you a leg up.
So I'm going to disagree. Yeah. So I think it's important throughout somebody's career. And there's a couple different reasons. I think in the beginning it's very important because you need to separate yourself from the other individuals that you just graduated with. What's different about you? Hopefully it's that you took the initiative to go ahead and take that additional step to further your education to hopefully get that full-time offer, right? But equally important, as you're continuing to grow throughout, it shows that curiosity, that you want to keep learning, you want to keep developing your skills, that you enjoy the challenge. So that's why I think it's important, consistently throughout. I do agree that the professional experience at some point is definitely going to play a factor in that, but individuals who are still interested in learning about other areas of security that they maybe don't have the professional experience, it says a lot about them as well.
Yeah, we talk a lot on campus about instilling the value in students, that it's not just about what you're learning today to get the grade, but about instilling the values of becoming a lifelong learner, because especially anywhere in the tech space, if you're not ready to engage in that, you probably need to be looking for some other sort of career path for sure. So we've talked about some of the shortages, and I want to circle back in a little bit to talk about kind of what we can do as a group to change the culture and create more of a security-oriented culture community in Nashville. But before we kind of leave away from the recruiting side, it's like, does your organization currently, like, do you engage in any novel recruiting strategies? Or every company, it's kind of, it's just almost common knowledge now that there's a tech shortage and everybody's trying to figure out ways to deal with that. Is there anything like special, or do you think your company is doing well, or that is particularly unique that's helping you with your talent needs?
I don't think there's anything necessarily unique to our recruiting effort, other than when we start to get in the interview process. And it was one of the things in the report that I thought was interesting. I think communication was a skill that dropped in its importance compared to overall tech. And especially for us when we're dealing with clients, executives at clients, folks that we have to typically communicate with in a cohesive manner. Soft skills is super important. So in our interview process, what we lead candidates through, it's yes, the technical skill or the information security skills are important, but a lot of that can also be taught. The soft skills are really where we focus a lot of our interview questions and situational interviews around, just to make sure that we're bringing in somebody into the organization that is going to be able to uphold our values, communicate well, take care of clients, care about those things that are harder to be taught than a technical skill.
I mean, we went from 0 people here to 500, so our recruiting really was nothing any different. We did have to rely on a lot of recruiting agencies to get it done, but overall we're pretty basic when it comes to recruiting.
So you do have to get creative. In some instances, we've tried to attend, meetups when recruiters are allowed. Oftentimes they're closed, so you can't. But the ones that welcome us will go, not to like poach talent, but just to network. I think relationships and kind of identifying people, culture at Asurion is a big deal, and it's a huge part of our interview process. And it's really important to make sure that we're going to be adding people to our team that are going to help us continue to build on that culture, that people love coming to work every day. They're very passionate about what they're doing. So we make, networking connections. And then oftentimes, I think people take for granted referrals, because good people know good people. And they may not be a fit today, but they could be a fit down the road. So just taking the time to ask internal employees that are known for strong performance, hey, do you know anybody else who might be interested down the road that I could connect with? Or even candidates. I've had candidates who ended up not working out, but they had such a positive experience that they were saying, hey, my friend's also looking, and you might want to reach out to him or her, right? So it's not being afraid to ask for that opportunity to engage in a potential candidate down the road.
Sure.
Actually, I forgot, but just on the recruiting effort, we have an open position for an IT analyst, so if anybody's looking, come see me afterwards.
You want to play that game?
Yeah. Oh, geez. All right, guys. So this is a conversation that, or a topic that I've heard mentioned, and you're not going to hurt my feelings because I am a professor at a four-year university. But as we talk about the challenge, the challenges of finding talent, there's been a lot of talk about, well, maybe it's just our assumptions and maybe the things that we've always done in trying to find the talent, things like requiring a 4-year degree, or, I've heard more than once in the past 6 months, it's like, well, for a lot of the like entry-level technical jobs, that doesn't necessarily require a 4-year degree, yet that is often one of the ways that you kind of go through you separate that initial list of candidates. I would love to get y'all's feedback on just what your opinions on that. And is redefining what is an acceptable candidate. Is that one of the things that we can do to address this?
So just a 4-year degree in general, or?
Either. I mean,
Either.
it can
I mean,
be either. So
yeah, I mean, I look at it. I mean, I think if someone went to the proper, you know, I don't want to say trade schools, or just had that proper experience, say in the military or any of those aspects. I mean, I'm more looking for the hard skills in general, not just the 4-year degree. I think, especially with security being such a specialized spot in some cases, you know, and I think the 4-year, you know, this colleges now are trying to get a little more creative with their programs. I'm on the board at Tennessee Tech, and they are creating new programs around cyber and trying to bring in people to those things, getting certifications at the start, and trying to grow those programs instead of just getting the standard 4-year MIS degree and going out and saying what I want to do in my life. So trying to give them those kind of hard skills that they could use.
I'll go real quick. Yeah, so I think in our job descriptions it says, you know, 4-year degree or equivalent experience desired, but that is not something that stops us from hiring a candidate. I mean, we have had candidates come right out of college, or employees that come right out of college with a 4-year MIS degree, and that's just, that doesn't mean a whole lot, honestly. So couple that with certifications or some different experience. We don't use the degree kind of as a barrier to entry for most of our roles.
I think it's the same at Asurion too. Depending on the role, the 4-year degree would have more emphasis than some of the other ones, but I think many of the managers that I've had the opportunity to support would agree that, you know, if you've got 2 candidates in front of you, one who does have the 4-year degree but is lacking the motivation and the initiative and the drive and the passion that we look for, versus another candidate who may have an associate's with some certifications, you know, given them both the opportunity to interview, the one who's going to add value from a culture perspective and have that drive and want to continue to build on that education, I think would be the preference between the two.
So I want to circle back to, you know, I love community events like this because one of the things that I love about Nashville is that we really do have a tight tech community, and there are different sort of subsets of that you can be involved in, and it's cool today to be involved in an event that isn't necessarily one of the waters that I typically swim in. What do you think that we can do as a community to address the talent shortages and to kind of change the narrative of Nashville not being a security town? Or like what can we do collectively? I know this wasn't on the list of questions, but we've got time, so I would just like to get your thoughts on it.
I think we need to start earlier. You know, we're working, I know the state of Tennessee is working with high schools now. I'm working in Maury County with the superintendent around a cybersecurity program for high school students. So working at that level too, as well as the college level, to get in more talent. I think you know, I see there's a lot more around, you know, software development and those type of boot camps and different things, but I really don't see anything around for security in general. I think that's something that we could probably do. And then this type of event is something that we probably need to build on. I mean, we see a lot from a general IT perspective, but security's kind of been lacking, so I'm just glad Mark actually started this up so we can have more and more events in the community.
All right, I'll go. So I think one of the things that that I'm starting to see some more involvement is professional associations like ISSA, ISSA InfraGard, doing more outreach earlier. So you know, ISSA working on a program to reach into high schools, middle schools even, to start developing relationships and delivering curriculum, classes, things like that. But I'd agree, starting as early as possible where we can pique some interest. And seeing if you can carry that into high school, and then some of the vocational schools, Nashville State, Columbia State and develop those programs as well as other universities like MTSU. But earlier we can start, I think the better.
I'd agree with that as well. I think there's an opportunity too that we've got talent that's here already. They just may not be in security, and maybe they haven't uncovered that passion yet that many of you have already found. So I think it's just helping promote that awareness. I know at Asurion with the Mavens program, those individuals are primarily in development roles. So they're not technically under the security umbrella, but they're going through trainings, they're earning certifications to increase their security awareness. And so at Asurion, we're trying to kind of help that spread like wildfire. I think that's a potential option for us to explore, not considering bringing in external talent from outside of Tennessee. And then other than that, you know, Mark has started an OWASP Nashville chapter. So increasing the awareness through that avenue and other security chapters, I think could be beneficial for us.
All right. Well, that wraps up the formal list of questions. Do any of y'all have any kind of parting thoughts on the topic of recruiting and retaining security talent, or anything else about the report that stood out to you? Oh, just as a follow-up to what he said about communications, we didn't talk about it, or I didn't talk about it in the presentation, but it does also break down not just the top 10 hard skills, but also the top 10 common skills. And the common skills or soft skills is where the communication piece came in. When you looked at overall tech, communication came in as the number 2 skill, but when you zoomed in on the information security postings, it didn't drop too far, but it went down. It went down to the number 4 slot and a couple of other more technically, to the extent that common skills can be technical. They were infrastructure and information technology scooched up the list and kind of knocked it down. So with that, we will turn it over to questions. This is what the post-lunch lull looks like. Anybody? Yes, we need to. Hang on. Well, they're recording it, and we have to make sure we're using the microphone.
My radio voice. So it's kind of a silly question, but some truth to it. Mark, not me. I work for Asurion and know Mark, and I work in the West Coast, and so I would ask, what would candidates from the West Coast find attractive about Nashville, or turn it around? Is anybody looking to poach people from the West Coast?
Is Brian here? Brian Moyer? I saw him in the back of the room a little earlier. Well, I didn't know if he wanted to talk about the work he's doing with the chambers. I can speak to it a little, or if any of y'all want to talk about it. I will say the answer is yes, and Brian can talk more about the Nashville Technology Council's initiatives on that when he gets in here, but we are having conversations. And I will say that another piece of the data that comes, with the subscription we have to provide this type of research, one of the things that it allows us to do, allows us to analyze the markets that we should be recruiting from, and I can tell you that the West Coast shows up in that. And there are a number of factors that go into those rankings, but yes, I do think that we're looking at it. But the other piece of that is trying to figure out how to brand not necessarily a particular company or a particular job, or a particular company or a particular, a role that you would take, but brand the city. Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot for just a second. We had a question. We have a gentleman here who works for Asurion from the West Coast, and he was talking about, would the West Coast be a potential place where we would look to recruit talent from? And your initiatives with the chamber kind of came to mind. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, or sort of generally give your thoughts on. Here's the microphone.
I think the West Coast is a great target for us to look at recruiting from for a couple of reasons. I mean, those of us that live in Nashville love the city. The things that we hear as people come in to visit, particularly from the East Coast to the West Coast, is the quality of life, the cost of living. Even though it has ratcheted up for those of us that live here, it's still far less expensive than it is on the West Coast or the East Coast. There's a creative class here, a creative ecosystem that's very deep and very long-lived. Not just the music performing arts, but also the music writing and all the creativeness that comes with that. Plus fashion industry, there's just a lot of creative types that exist here. That's, as you come in with a technology career, it's easy to get plugged into that and really kind of find a home amongst other creative types. Also, recently in talking to some of my peers and counterparts in Seattle and San Francisco, Toronto, New York, Austin, and hearing about what they call the tech lash that's going on in those cities. Some of that's just general backlash against big business that's happening in our country today. In those areas, tech is big business, and so it's being focused on tech. But there's just there's a lot that's happening, particularly from local governments, that's kind of making the tech employers and the tech workers feel like maybe they're not so welcome in those places. And I think what they would find here is a much more welcoming, friendly atmosphere for people to come and be a part of. Does that help?
I'll give you, my quick perspective as well. So we moved here 6 years ago from California, and when we told our friends and family we were moving to Nashville, I think, at least back then, the perception was that we were moving to the middle of nowhere. And did they actually have running water in Tennessee? I'm not. Is there indoor plumbing? And obviously, folks that are around here know, this is a great place to live. And I think from a branding perspective, there's just been, more and more of that effort from the tourism industry and other organizations, chamber organizations, to enhance that image outside of Tennessee, and that's continuing to develop. But I think we've got a lot to offer here. And as a former West Coaster who doesn't necessarily lean that direction on the political spectrum, there's some camaraderie out here just on that side as well, and you can find a good place to raise a family. So a lot of benefits out here for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is just literally making sure people know where Nashville is on the map. There was an anecdote that was told in a meeting I was in a few weeks ago. There were some folks up trying to recruit in Chicago, and when you would even talk about Nashville, instead of thinking Middle Tennessee, the only real conception that they had of Tennessee was the Smoky Mountains. It's like, no, we don't. Nashville is not Gatlinburg. So there's just kind of I think that there's a lot on the branding side, and I think we get so indoctrinated into the media that we see every day. Nashville isn't it city. I adore living here, and it's easy to do, but yeah, for recruiting from outside, there's definitely some challenges there. Got it. I'm getting my exercise today. No, it's all good.
So I'm somebody who was recruited from the East Coast in the Northern Virginia, DC metro area, brought out for security work. And to me, one of the biggest things that was a plus side, and I don't know if the other companies here are doing it, are you providing relocation packages to help people make that transition, make that move, as well as giving them the opportunity to come out during an interview process to make sure that they have a little extra time, more than just fly out for just an interview, but to come see Nashville, to come see the area and talk about places that include, like, where should you live? What are those things? Because I didn't get that experience, but my dad lives here, so I kind of was able to talk to him ahead of time saying, hey, what do the communities look like and what was it like? So I had some information already. So that was one plus for me coming, but are you doing that too in terms of recruitment? Are you providing that component as well? To not only just talk about quality of life, but to show that.
Yeah, so we provide a full reload package. We have a company that actually goes out and helps them find the right location. And then we have a bunch of things internally that we do from a recruiting department. With us, we moved from Anaheim, California to Nashville. Some of the guys actually came. Some of them said, no, I'm not moving to Tennessee. I'm going to stay out in California. But some did come. So we provided that support for them. And then since we've had to grow so fast, we've done the same thing for everybody else that's come in.
Here. You can scoot in.
I'm gonna take your
gonna
spot.
Yep, go for it.
We do the same thing. And then as far as the interview process, if the candidate is from outside of Tennessee, we will have them fly in the afternoon or evening before their interview, spend the night in a hotel nearby, and then interview the following morning, and then they will fly out that next afternoon. I have had candidates request to, if they were interviewing at the end of the week, to stay for a couple more nights, and then we'll pay for that initial night, and then if they want to stay, they can pay for that, but we'll make sure that their flight back is booked for that. And then with the relocation, there's actually verbiage in there that allows for the candidate and their significant other to have a trip to Nashville. And it's several days, and have the opportunity to meet with a realtor and go sightseeing and kind of scope potential areas that they'd be interested in living in. It's definitely important, so we want to make sure that they are aware of what they're getting into, because Nashville is fantastic, right? And you can't see everything from Broadway, you know?
Yeah. All right.
I saw an interesting discussion the other day on Hacker News around recruitment, and Hacker News can be a little bit of its own echo chamber. So I think what I'm curious about is one of the discussions that I think was interesting specifically about security engineering and all of the things that come with hiring is there was a prevailing sense that not only were certifications not interesting, but they actually could be bad for your career in certain sectors. And then the second thing that I thought was interesting is, and I tend to agree with this personally, I think one of the things they talked a lot about is how most hiring is pretty much garbage. It's really random, and it's darts at dartboards. And one of the things they talked about is how do you begin moving that forward, and there were several links to some good articles about it. People had done some writing. One of the things that really stood out that I thought was interesting was someone used the example of, it's like taking someone who plays a cello, bringing them in, asking them questions about music theory, but never asking them to actually play the cello, and then trying to ask them some personality questions and then hire them for an orchestra. And I'm wondering, how much work are y'all seeing, or are y'all doing in terms of developing hiring practices that actually build in assessments for whether people can actually do the work, rather than just simply running them through the gauntlet of personality, certification checklists, team culture fit, and those kinds of things. And I'm kind of curious on your reflection on how do we push that forward so that we're actually measuring meaningful things that actually gives a sense of the performance of a person.
So I'll take that. As part of our interview process, we do have a skills assessment that is built into it, and we take that into consideration as part of the overall the different metrics that we look at. It's not the end all be all, but there is an active skills assessment that's part of the program already. I'll be honest though. I think again I would rather teach somebody the technical skills if I can find somebody with the right soft skills. And that's a whole rabbit trail you can go down, but a great book as an example is Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni, Humble, Hungry, Smart. That's a big part of what we're looking for in candidates. And if you have those qualifications or those standards, then you can typically teach somebody what you need them to do on the technical or security side. So it's not something that we're lacking in our process, but it's not something that we put a lot of weight into as well.
Quick follow-up, which will be for everybody. When you talk about teaching it to them on the job, how are you teaching it to them? Are you bringing in on-site training? Are you sending them to a boot camp? Are you saying, all right, you find what you want to do and we'll pay for it? What does that actually teaching them once they're in the door look like?
Depends on the person and how they learn best. I mean, I think that's, and hopefully, some people don't know how they learn best. Some people already know, so a boot camp works for some people. Studying out a book works for other people. On-the-job training next to a person that knows how to do that skill works for other people. So we kind of do a combination, variety of things.
So I don't agree that certifications are garbage. There are probably, some that are more relevant than others. I would agree with that, but the technical aspect of the interview process is definitely present. So while I may be saying how important our culture and the personality fit and the soft skills are important, equally important are the technical skills, or what we like to call the intellectual horsepower. So they may not be an exact fit, but they have that capacity and curiosity and interest and drive to get to where we need them to be. So our interview process is the initial conversation with a recruiter, and then you'll have typically a follow-up conversation either with a hiring manager or a senior team member, where there will be some technical aspects of that call. When we bring the candidate on site as the final step, there are individuals within that panel that are dedicated to focusing on that technical skill needed for that individual to be successful on that team. So it could be whiteboarding, or it could be, hey, here's a pen and paper, like draw it out for me, or they might just be having that dialogue. But it is definitely important, and it is part of our interview process. I won't say it's we're not looking for bullseye, but we're looking as close to as possible, or individuals who could get there, if that makes sense.
Brian? Yep.
So, we try, our stage is recruiter, talking to the hiring manager, and then going in kind of a technical review with co-workers within that space. So there's going to be technical questions. We just hired somebody in the networking space, and there was whiteboarding sessions. So is there anything, do we do anything where they're actually sitting behind a keyboard and trying to knock something out? No. I think that might be a benefit one day, but we're not at that level.
Yeah. Something else, just from an academic setting with doing things like that in those compressed time frames, I have gotten, it's a similar but not, it's an analogous situation where, students are like, I know how to do this, I can definitely do this, I just can't do it when you tell me I have 30 minutes and my grade or a job is depending on it. So I could see there being pros and cons to those types of assessments, although having some form of it is definitely important. You had your hand up, right? No, sorry.
Yeah, so I'm going to bounce off what the gentleman kind of mentioned over there, because I actually just have recent experience of transitioning. And I was in, I guess a couple questions here. I was transitioning, a career transition from being a bomb technician to getting into IT security. I felt along the road I did all the right things. I have certifications. I have my own lab that I work in constantly. I'm always getting hands-on experience, got the degree, networked, whole 9 yards, but the one thing I found over 6 months, and even getting advice from like my mother who's worked HR for 30 years, other recruiters, other friends, other people in security, I couldn't get my stuff past HR. Once I got past that recruiter, or got that recruiter that just gave me the shot in the dark, things went forward really well from there. So I guess my question would kind of be what do you recommend, I guess maybe in like the resume and the cover letter to get it past HR? What are you communicating to your HR and your recruiters as far as specifically what you're looking for and things like that? Because especially like Mackenzie said, you guys are also looking for people that may not just jump from technology to security, but also, hey, I've worked 30 years in finance and I want to do security all of a sudden. So I guess, advice for those doing career changes more or less.
Yeah, I think it's mainly on the relationship with the hiring manager and the recruiter that's going out and looking. Because, they're going to get, hopefully, tons and tons of resumes, and they're looking for those specific keywords. And if they don't see the keyword, they're going to pitch it over to the side, or if it doesn't map back, they're going to put it over to the side. So I think really talking to the hiring manager and getting them to understand what you really need for an employee, saying, I don't really need the 4-year degree, but I really need this, is the biggest thing that we need to do. But yeah, I think everybody in our careers, even if we've been in security forever, if I go off and put my resume together, I'm always going, why didn't I get a call back? And it's always, it's really probably that step internally that was missing.
I'd agree a lot, because I think having that relationship with the hiring manager and that dynamic between the recruiter and the two is important. mostly because you need to be able to speak up for the person who's not able to speak for themselves, right? So perfect example is I just last week had one of my final candidates get hired that the hiring manager told me that she did not want to screen because she didn't look good on paper. And I was like, but you should really talk to her, right? So when I'm having that initial conversation with the candidate, I'm listening for that passion, that drive. Hey, I know I don't have the skill right now, but I have the interest, and this is what I'm doing to work towards that. The way you can call it out on your resume is actually put a section for continuous education. So are there certifications or trainings that you're taking the initiative on your own to go out and learn? And so they don't have to be completed. I actually tell people, if you're in the process or you're scheduled to start taking that course or that training, put it on your resume and put in process, because that's going to be that first step. In the more technical roles where you might be developing, if you have a GitHub account, put it on your resume, anything like that to set yourself apart. And then just make sure that you're very forthcoming with the recruiter. Hey, I know I don't have the skills today, but I'm committed to this process. I definitely have the drive, and I'm looking for the opportunity.
And I would follow up during if you do get to the conversation, the first phone screen. We've had several candidates in there in that part of the process just not seem to care that much about that conversation and who they're talking to, and that gets reflected in what comes back to the hiring manager, and we'll just kick those people out pretty quickly. So if you do get that opportunity to have that first conversation, really engage, talk about more than what's on your resume. Try to get that person excited to pass on your information to the hiring manager.
So to that, too, so if you have that conversation with the hiring manager and they ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. But then I would jot down what they were talking about, and if you get to go to that next level, when you show up to that next conversation, hey, I talked to Mark, and he asked me this, and I didn't know, but I looked it up, and this is what I found out. Like, taking it to that next step.
All right, great. I think we are officially over our time. We've got a little bit of leeway since the conference is in a break. But if you would please join me in giving a warm round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much. We're here and available, and I just want to throw up, if you want to download the report, I wanted to make sure you had the information to do that. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great rest of the day.